When night fell on Viking lands, the real battle began, not against men, but against the beasts of the wild. In the silent forest of the north, glowing eyes moved through the darkness. Wolves hunted in packs. Bears followed the smell of smoke and meat. For the Vikings, every shelter they built was a fortress, every wall a shield against claws and teeth. In a world where nature attacked without warning, survival meant more than strength. It meant defense. In Viking Scandinavia, humans weren't the only predators. Wolves, lynxes, bears, and wild boars roamed freely. When food was scarce in winter, these animals grew desperate, drawn by the scent of cooking fires and stored meat. A Viking shelter that wasn't secured could turn into a death trap overnight. The Vikings understood this reality deeply. They didn't build for beauty or comfort, they built for war against nature. Every sound at night could mean danger. The first rule of safety was distance from animal paths. Before setting camp, they watched the land. Flattened grass or claw marks on trees told them where animals passed. They never built on those routes. Shelters were placed near cliffs, frozen lakes, or rocky slopes where predators couldn't circle around unseen. They also took advantage of terrain elevation. Building slightly higher on a slope gave them vision of the valley below. Wolves rarely attacked uphill, and bears struggled to climb icy inclines. From these natural watch points, guards could spot movement long before it reached camp. A Viking shelter looked simple, but its defense was deliberate. The outer layer wasn't just wood and moss, it was armor. They built double walls, the outer one made of turf or logs, and the inner one of woven branches. Between the two, they packed dry moss and clay. This didn't just trap heat, it muffled sound and scent, two things that attracted animals most. The doorway was their strongest barrier. Instead of a single door, they created two entrances separated by a short tunnel, like an airlock. The outer door was lower, forcing anyone or anything to crouch down to enter. That motion gave the Viking inside time to strike if an animal tried to break in. The inner door was reinforced with crossbeams that could be barred from the inside using a wooden lock. To prevent claw attacks, Vikings strengthened lower walls with horizontal logs bound by leather straps. Wolves or bears clawing at the entrance couldn't find weak spots. In some regions, they even hammered bone spikes into the ground in front of the entryway. Sharp remains of elk or whale ribs placed upright in the snow. It worked like an early fence of deterrence. One wrong step could injure an animal and drive it off. Defense for the Vikings did not stop with the walls or doors. What truly protected them through the darkest nights was the barrier line. The invisible ring of traps, spikes, and fire that surrounded their shelters like a living wall. It wasn't built for decoration. It was built for survival. Before sunset, Viking guards walked the edge of camp to inspect this line. They hammered sharpened wooden stakes into the frozen soil, angled slightly outward. The idea was simple. If a bear or wolf tried to rush the shelter, the creature's own weight and momentum would drive it straight into those spikes. The points, hardened in fire and sometimes coated with animal fat or tar, didn't just pierce. They smelled of burning and fear. Animals recognized the scent of fire and avoided it. When the ground froze solid, digging became impossible. That's when Vikings switched to stone rings. They rolled heavy rocks around the perimeter, layering them waist-high, with narrow slits left between for vision and weapon use. Those gaps became shooting points for arrows or spear thrusts if a predator approached. The stone itself echoed sound. When a wolf's paw touched it, the vibration could be felt inside the shelter, alerting the guards before any growl reached their ears. But the barrier line wasn't only physical, it was acoustic. Vikings believed that sound could travel farther than sight in snow, so they turned their walls into alarm systems. They strung ropes around the camp, hanging from them bones, seashells, and bundles of dry twigs. When the wind blew, these objects stayed silent. But when something moved through them, an animal brushing or stepping near, the faint clatter broke the night silence like a whisper of danger. One touch could wake the entire camp. Even more ingenious were the horn traps. Vikings hollowed out animal horns, filled them with small pebbles or dry beans, and tied them to hidden tripwires. If a wolf or bear crossed the wire, the horn rattled violently. The sound wasn't loud enough to scare the creature, but it echoed through the still air, reaching the guards inside. They had only seconds to grab weapons and torches, but those seconds were often enough. Fire was their final line of defense. Vikings knew animals feared flame more than any wall. Around the perimeter, they placed fire beacons, small stone mounds coated with animal fat that burned slow and steady. These weren't bright bonfires, they were low, controlled flames, protected by flat stones on top. The fire's glow was dim, but its heat and scent warned predators that humans were near. The beacons were placed in a pattern, one every few paces, so that from a distance, the light appeared to move as if men were walking guard. Wolves, sensing activity, stayed away. Even during violent blizzards, these fires endured. The stone covers shielded the flame from snow, allowing it to burn for hours with almost no smoke. The flickering light seen through the storm created the illusion of shifting figures, confusing beasts into thinking the camp was still awake. It was an ancient psychological defense. Make the enemy believe you never sleep. Predators hunted mostly through smell. The Vikings used this to their advantage. They learned to control scent as a defense weapon. Before nightfall, they burned pine resin, dried fish scales, and seal oil, producing a thick, pungent smoke. This masked the odor of cooked meat and human sweat, scents that would otherwise draw wolves from miles away. Some Viking hunters collected the urine of bears or wildcats and sprinkled it around the perimeter. These smells marked territory and confused approaching predators into thinking the area already belonged to a stronger beast. For Vikings, this wasn't superstition. It was an early form of animal psychology. They also burned specific plants known to repel animals. Angelica, mugwort, and juniper were common. The smell irritated wolves and insects alike. Juniper smoke in particular served as both a disinfectant and a deterrent, used near entry points and vents. Fire management was precise. Flames too bright revealed their location, while too little smoke failed to hide the scent. Vikings learned to control oxygen flow using layered stones, allowing embers to burn slow, invisible, and hot. Inside, it kept them warm. Outside, it hid them from the wild. Each night followed a pattern of vigilance. The Vikings worked in guard shifts, usually 2 or 3 people at a time, rotating every few hours. These guards didn't sit idly. They patrolled in silence, walking the perimeter to check for tracks or broken traps. The sound of crunching snow underfoot was often enough to warn lurking animals. Inside, the rest slept light. Warriors kept spears within arm's reach and torches ready to ignite in seconds. If an alarm sounded, everyone moved according to a set rhythm. One lit torches, another blocked the door, and the third armed the spears or axes. No shouting, no panic, only practice steps born from survival training. Dogs were crucial defenders. Every Viking camp had trained dogs bred for alarm and protection. These weren't just pets, they were early warning systems. Dogs were positioned near the entrance, tied loosely so they could move and sniff around. Their hearing could detect the faintest movement through snow. When a dog growled low, Vikings knew it wasn't imagination, it was danger. If defense failed and an animal reached the shelter, the fight was brutal. Bears could tear through wood, and wolves attacked in packs. The Vikings designed shelters to control the fight, not flee from it. The narrow tunnel between the 2 doors acted as a choke point. Only one animal could enter at a time, giving the Vikings a perfect angle to strike. They used boar spears with crossguards to stop the weapon from slipping too deep, ensuring they could pull it back quickly for another thrust. Others used torches soaked in animal fat. Fire frightened most predators more than any weapon. In narrow shelters, even a small flame reflected off the walls, making the space appear larger and more chaotic to an attacking beast. Sometimes, instead of confronting directly, Vikings used sound and shock. They slammed shields against wood, shouted war cries, or threw burning sticks through openings. The echo in the tight space amplified every noise, confusing and terrifying the animal. These psychological defenses often prevented real combat. The Vikings didn't rely solely on brute defense. They studied the wild. Hunters and scouts knew how animals thought, and they used this knowledge to trap or deter them. Around shelters, they set pit traps covered with branches and snow. Wolves chasing scents would fall through and struggle to climb out. In bear country, they built hanging alarms, heavy logs tied with rope above entry paths. If something brushed the tripwire, the log swung down with force, stunning or scaring the intruder. They also exploited the hierarchy of fear among animals. The scent of fire and metal frightened wolves, but bears feared vibration. Vikings would drive wooden stakes deep into the ground and strike them periodically with mallets. The vibration carried through the frozen earth, mimicking an earthquake. Bears avoided such areas instinctively. By observing tracks, Vikings could tell which creatures had approached recently. A shallow, even print meant wolves. Deep, uneven marks with claws meant bears. They adjusted defense accordingly, adding more noise traps for wolves, more barriers for bears. During long winters, when storms forced them to stay put for weeks, Vikings built reinforced defense rings around larger camps. These weren't casual walls, they were organized systems of protection. The first ring was wooden stakes and thorn branches, high enough to block wolves. The second ring was turf mounds built waist-high, doubling as walkways for guards. The outermost zone was left clear of snow, flattened daily so tracks were visible in the morning. Guards used burning pitch bowls set on poles to create small halos of light at intervals. These flickering flames played tricks on animal eyes, making it seem as if multiple guards were walking around. In case of an approach, horns were blown, not for battle but to scare animals with the sudden blast of deep sound. Inside, families stored food in hanging sacks suspended from beams. This kept the scent higher, harder for animals to locate. Any leftover scraps or bones were buried deep or burned, never thrown outside casually. They knew that one careless act, a piece of meat left near snow, could bring danger by nightfall. Sometimes defense meant not being found at all. Vikings learned to camouflage their shelters like hunters hide in forests. The roofs were covered with branches and snow, blending perfectly with the terrain. Smoke was vented sideways through hidden exits, mixing with fog or mist. From a distance, even wolves couldn't tell a human scent from the forest zone. They sometimes used decoy fires a short distance away from the real shelter. These small, smoldering fires carried the smell of cooking fat, luring curious predators away. If a bear or wolf approached that fire, it found nothing but ashes and empty ground. Some Vikings carried iron chimes made from bent metal scraps. Hung outside the door, the faint metallic ring in the wind mimicked strange sounds animals didn't recognize, triggering their natural caution. This was more psychological than physical, but it worked. To the Vikings, knowledge of animal behavior was a weapon equal to any blade. They knew wolves hunted with patience, circling quietly for hours. So they designed their defenses to deny surprise. Flat open zones, reflective stones, and constant patrols ruined the element of stealth. They knew bears attacked only when desperate or startled. That's why shelters were never built too close to berry patches or riverbanks where bears fished. The Vikings respected territory boundaries as carefully as they respected their own. And they learned that sound, steady, rhythmic human sound was its own kind of defense. Singing, hammering, and chanting were not just tradition. They reminded the wild that humans were awake, alert, and unafraid. The Vikings carried specific weapons for animals, different from those used in war. The boar spear with its broad crossbar was common. It stopped a charging animal from reaching the wielder. Short hand axes doubled as tools and weapons, perfect for quick swings in tight spaces. They also made throwing spikes from sharpened antlers. Light enough to toss through narrow windows, these spikes could wound or scare away predators without forcing close combat. The edges were smeared with animal fat to catch flame, turning them into small fire darts when needed. Some Viking settlements in bear territory used stone drop traps above the shelter entrance. A balanced rock slab, tied by rope, could be released by pulling from inside. If a creature rammed the door, the slab fell forward, crushing, or at least stunning it. Every tool they made was portable, because defense didn't end when they moved on. A Viking always carried part of his shelter's protection with him: spikes, ropes, torches, and dogs. Accounts from Icelandic sagas describe entire nights when Vikings fought off predators together. In one such winter record, a pack of wolves surrounded a camp near Jämtland. The Vikings responded by lighting concentric fire circles around their shelter, 3 layers of low flames. The wolves circled but never crossed. By morning, their tracks told the story of a siege that failed without a single wound. Another tale from Greenland spoke of a bear breaking through a turf wall. The Vikings inside collapsed part of their roof intentionally, trapping the bear in falling logs. The creature was later butchered for meat. Its fur used to patch the damage, a brutal but effective defense that turned danger into resource. These were not stories of luck, they were lessons. Every victory against nature became shared knowledge, passed from clan to clan so the next generation could build smarter, defend faster, and fear less. The Vikings weren't only warriors of the sea, they were engineers of survival. Their shelters were not simple huts, but intelligent fortresses adapted to the beasts of the wild north. Their courage wasn't reckless, it was calculated. So, the next time we think of Viking strength, remember this. True power wasn't in their swords, it was in their walls, their fire, and their unshakable will to live. If you enjoyed this journey into Viking survival, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, would you have survived one night in their world? Because in the North, it wasn't the wars that tested you, it was the wilderness.